Okay, we're going to talk about graphing radical or square root of x. And this is one of our parent functions. We'll use this a lot in mathematics. It's a good example. And we're going to see that when there's a 1 in front of this square root of x, we have a shape that's kind of consistent relative to what we call the starting point or the point of origin. So let's just make a table of values and see kind of what this looks like. Now we know that this cannot be a negative number under the radical because it's not defined, so x has always got to be positive. So we really don't have to worry about any values over here if this is just x. So I put some values in. So when x is 0, what's the square root of 0? 0. When x is 1, the square root of 1 is 1. Now when x is 2, the square root of 2 is about 1.4, and that's a little bit more difficult to graph. So I'll avoid that, and I'll just use perfect squares to get my key points. And when x is 4, what's the square root of 4? 2. So these are my key points for the square root of x. And I put these down. 0, 0, and that's what we call the point of origin. And then 1, 1. And then when x is 4, y is 2. And that gives us a good idea. If we went farther out, the next one would be 9. When x is 9, the square root of 9 is 3. So I'd go up a little bit higher. But we don't have that much room on this little graph, so we'll leave it like that. So this is all we really need to get an idea of what the square root of x looks like. Now how about when y is negative the square root of x? Well, we'll put some points in and see. So when x is 0, the square root of 0 is 0, negative 0, 0. When x is 1, the square root of 1 is 1, and negative 1 is negative 1. And when x is 4, the square root of 4 is 2, but negative times 2 is negative 2. So those are my points, and I'll graph those. This is the point of origin. 1, negative 1. 4, negative 2. And you can see that now it's below the x-axis. And it's just kind of flipped from this one. In other words, it's just symmetrical to the x-axis. So just put a negative sign that just kind of flips it about the x-axis. Okay, and then another one. Let's take a look at y equals the square root of negative x. Now we know under the radical cannot be negative. So the only way negative x would be positive would be if x is negative. So it has to be over here. So let's take a look at some values and see how that works. So when x is 0, well, the square root of negative 0 is just 0. The negative 0 and 0 are the same. Now when x is negative 1, if I put negative 1 in here, negative 1 is positive 1, and the square root of positive 1 is 1, so we're okay, you see. And then when x is negative 4, negative 4 is positive 4, and I can't take the square root of a positive 4, and that's 2. So when we graph these points, 0, 0, negative 1, 1, and negative 4, 2, this is what we get. So you see now we've kind of reflected our first graph up here, we've kind of reflected it about the y-axis. So when we have a negative sign in front, we reflect it about the x-axis. And if we have a negative sign inside, we reflect it about the y-axis. And let's try one more. Now, remember I just said if we have a negative sign in front, we flip it about the x-axis. So this would probably be flipped down here. So we'll put some points in just to check it out. Because these are your 4 basic shapes. When x is 0, negative 0 is 0. That's all right. And then we're going to use negatives like this. So when x is negative 1, a negative times a negative is positive. So the square root of positive 1 is 1, but with a negative makes that negative 1. And how about negative 4? The square root of negative 4 is the square root of 4, which is okay. That's going to be 2, but that's going to be negative 2. So now we have 0, 0, negative 1, and negative 4, negative 2. So it does indeed seem like it's reflected about the x-axis. So if we put a negative sign, we reflect it about, it's kind of flipped about the x-axis if we have a negative sign in front. But if we have a negative sign inside, it kind of flips it about the y-axis. So those are your 4 basic shapes. Now these are all relative to the point of origin. 0, 0. So we can shift this left and right and up and down, and we'll show you that in the next video. But for right now, make sure that you thoroughly do understand these 4 shapes, and then you could actually put them in one graph if you wanted. This is y equals the square root of x, and we'll use a different color here. This is y equals negative the square root of x. And this is y equals the square root of negative x. And I'll just use this one again. And this is y equals negative the square root of negative x. So those 4, you really want to make sure that you can handle those.